Hi, welcome to the first round of the third IWGM. Yay! My name is Regina, accompanied with the amazing panelist Kagio. Um, let's start the round without any further ado. Yeah, to call upon the first speaker from OG. Here.
Hello, I'm audible, I assume. Okay. POI, please just unmute yourself. Pronouns they, them, she, her. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. If female Apex Legends players can thrive in the Japanese circuit without the gender segregation, it just goes to show that the separation is useless at best and downright harmful at worst. Two things in my speech. Firstly, on how this invalidates female esports players. Secondly, counterfactual. First, I just want on like invalidation. I just want to draw a parallel to other sports that already have this kind of mechanism. Like you can see this happening in chess. You can see this happening in like WNBA, for example. Like I know they're not like totally esports, but they still have like the same mechanism and the same kind of like culture around it. And you can see in chess when they lower the ELO requirements for you to be a women grandmaster or for you to be any kind of rank, the fan base is always ready to dog on you, to just jump you at any moment. The fan base like consistently discredited a lot of the women grandmasters ranks and their capabilities, especially when they are like, when especially when they're seen to like, have been given that rank, because they are uh because they are like, I don't know, because they don't deserve it or because they were given a shortcut to begin with. So because of this perceived cheating or like this perceived in unworthiness, a lot of the fan base is quick to discredit the female chess players, and I think this also applies to like the female esports players. I just want to characterize what is exactly true about the esports culture. Firstly, on the fan base, it's not a mystery that all of them are super 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 toxic. The people who are interested in Apex Legends and Mobile Legends are very likely to be your abang-abang tongkrongan who is very sexist and misogynist, and have that like very ingrained mindset that they also apply to whoever they watch or like whoever they see it's competing with their favorite, I don't know, their bias or something. But also, secondly, the fellow players are also very toxic towards you as well. They're sweaty Reddit incels who have decided to dedicate their entire career to Mobile Legends. They're not the wokest, most liberal people ever. So what does this mean then? It means that like even in the fan base, they don't support you. Even in the fellow players, they don't support you. So intuitively, this sounds like a good idea for you to build this gender exclusive leagues, right? But this is not always totally true, especially in esport, yeah, especially in the context of esports, right? Especially when you lower the requirements, like say for example in Apex Legends tournaments, like the if you want to break in Apex Legends tournament for the men, you like let them have like the predator rank, but for the women, you only require a diamond requirement. Then this leads to like a lot of very like a very unideal outcomes for women generally. The only reason why IWGM can exist very healthily as a platform is because we already have a very established set of like very prominent WGM debaters who has contributed a lot towards the community and is well respected. Esports players don't have that. So they don't have a lot of credibility, they don't have any legitimacy. So when they establish this like separate like gender segregated tourneys or like their own titles, it just seems like firstly they are separating themselves from the rest of the people, but also secondly, it also seems like a concession towards the skill issue that the fan base is throwing them on. But also thirdly, nobody gives a shit about them. We can see in the status quo, like a lot of the attorneys in the info slide I have never heard of before until like 15 minutes ago, which just goes to show that these attorneys flop. They don't get enough traction. They don't even succeed in whatever in promoting the women esports players. And especially like, and I think this is also especially true even like we can draw the parallel from my other sports like WNBA. Nobody cares, and they even like and they even like invalidate the people in WNBA as even when they have like Caitlin Clark. So like I think this is gonna be even worse in esports when it's already perceptively and quote unquote easier game to play or like an easier sports. So separating them even further is just going to separate the women players further away from the other esports players, which further like grows like the disconnect between the community and like between the esports teams as well. But also secondly, it just like grows like such a huge rift between the fan base and between the female esports players. The reason why a lot of female esports players struggle to get a holding in the status quo is because firstly, unfortunately, it is true that they do not have enough like training or like enough skills to go up against the traditionally like Mongolian counter-strike teams. So like so the counterfactual is not to separate them from them, but to put them together. They might lose in the beginning, but once they get better because they get more funding and they get more attraction, which is going to be in the counterfactual, then that's how you can build a lot of credibility and legitimacy, and how you can establish at least a solid few icons that can serve as like a solid, I don't know, tangible icon for like the female esports player. They're not just like a myth or anything. I cannot even name any female esports player. I'm so sorry. I'm not an esports fan. So then what is our counterfactual? Instead of building like flops of like the tourneys and like the titles, you use the funding that you would have used to build the tourneys to fund the teams directly instead. The reason why a lot of teams struggle nowadays is because they don't have enough sponsorship. They don't have enough like donations or like streams or whatever. So in the counterfactual, once they get enough money to build their team, to get better gear, or like to just build better talent, that's how you can actually boost the women in the esports players teams. Like if you just build the tourney without like enough teams to begin with, it's just gonna be super boring. Nothing's gonna happen, and it's not gonna be fun for the players and also like for the fan base as well. Sure, it might be in the interest of the women player to have like this kind of community on their own, but it's not exclusive to the gender exclusive tourneys. They can have their own communities outside of it. They can hold their own events. You don't need to like explicitly make like a separate tourney that's further like that further like grows the divide between like this and that. So um yeah. So like again, I think the weighing here is that even though there might be some slight sense of community that can be built from the gender exclusive tourneys, it's not exclusive, but also secondly, it just grows more harm than good. How to propose?
Alright, thank you for the speech. Now to continue and to open the opposition case, please welcome first speaker for all. Here.
Hey, I want to check if I'm audible.
Yes, you're audible.
Wait. Uh, Let me set my timer first. Okay, all set. I will start my speech in 3, 2, and 1. Judges, as a woman, being to do something that they like is already hard, not to mention being a woman in esport. If we see at the status quo right now, the esport world is a very toxic and a patriarchal. In open tournament, there's open tournament that is that is woman and men being dicampur and they play together and that tournament. Woman is there, but not as a professional athlete, but just an object to judge if they make a little mistakes. Even if you are a professional athlete that wins several awards, it is not enough to defend you when you at a bad play. A little mistakes will be judged you with a sentence. Maybe it's because she is a woman. It's usual because she is a woman or something like you can just cook at home if you cannot play simple game like this. This is why we have to create an inclusive place where women can do whatever they want and show their capability without being judged with several stereotypes, right? And this is this house support motion. So the toxic environment is already exists in there at the first place. So the government cannot give the proposal to change the system. The debate is about to protect the most vulnerable actor here, which is the player itself, the female player. And we cannot like prioritize the interest of esport industry within a strategic mechanism, but within the interest of the woman player. Our goal is to not discriminate. Our goal is not to like make esport industry become more successful, but we want to create a safe space to advocate women in esport, which in Indonesia within our country in Indonesia is the league for esport is a very patriarchy. So in our movement right now is we want to create a safe space for women to grow, because if we mix them together in a one place, it's not gonna create a progressive movement or whatsoever, but the female player will get burden and stress, and then they feel like I don't deserve, maybe I'm not cut out for esport, and then quitting. And what we want is to like create a safe space so that they can grow together, they can focus on playing the game without being judged by the audience or by other player or by the male player, right? And why with this esport exclusive bracket, women will be judged based on skill, because in this world, in the esport league, it's not meritocratic at all. Woman is be seen as an object and as solely as an object. And what we see right now, due to the reality is a very fucked up when if woman is playing together in the fun match or in the spar, even if they like joining another party and playing with another male esport, they still get the stereotype that you just have to play in Mobile Legends, for example. They just allowed to play the player of the Magic Mage and just support. And if they want to play like the core player like Assassin, for example, if they make a little mistake, they will like kamu kan cewek, kamu gak bakal bisa main ini, and that's it. The toxic cycle will continue to happen, like right. And with esport, having an exclusive space is a crucial and important for cater more esport players that have the skill but not brave enough to break the stereotypes. And why when you like having a exclusive place, you will be allowed to play whatever role that you want. You will be allowed to play the assassin, for example, to play the tank, and not just focused on one role that is designed, that is the stereotypically designed just for women, right? And that is why the invalidity, the esports still it's not gonna happen in the first place, because we are advocating them to just try whatever they want, and right. And the second things is the word is a very this word is very discriminating for the woman, because as we see, even like looking for a scholarship, for example, and the criteria is that scholarship is open for all, and every as long as you register on it, you can be the awardee. But what happened right now, most of the awardee is men, because it's not all of them, but in our world, most of the awardee is men, just with the reasoning that men are more logical, for example. That is also happen in esport. If we separate the bracket tournament to protect the female player, that is also happen in esport, because even though the slogan is this is open for all, but at the end of the day, the one that will be profitable is the male player, because male player can also like um can also like membandingkan dengan compare with the female player. If the female player do the bad things, and the female player will be the scapegoat for the male player. For example, if they in the same team, and if the female player being a scapegoat, they will be stressed, right? And if we separate the bracket and tournament, they say that woman, if we pre if we if we if the woman, if they say that woman can just try harder, so they can setara dengan pria, it's not tangible to mix them. And in fact, it will harm the internal sense on the player when the player is constantly blaming them for a little thing that happened in the tournament. So with us having the spirit brigade, it's to protect their internal feelings, and to like there are no external things that push them to they just have to focus on the game. And that's why their advocacy to try more tournament in the future would be tangible in our side. Proud to oppose.
All right, thank you for the speech. A quick reminder for everybody to, first of all, please do time yourself so that you are informed how much time you are spending. But yeah, please be mindful of your time. Without any further ado, to continue, let's welcome second speaker from OG. Here.
Check, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Thank you. For pronouns, she, her. For POI, you could just drop in the chat. Wait a minute. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. I think whatever harms that does exist within the current status quo, that, for example, women are being belittled, being seen as objects, and they're not having any chances to improve, exists because you create such a big drift between men and women inside of esports. If these categories were not to exist to begin with, I don't think these harms would exist or be as bad as what OO is trying to describe. For all those reasons, please vote for OG. Moving on, then let's talk about two things. Firstly, I'm going to extend a few more things on my PM's speech. On first argument on validating female esports players, but let's talk about secondly on the counterfactual on how women will be able to thrive inside of these inside of mixed gender tournaments, or without the whole separate brackets to begin with. Firstly, let's talk about the first argument on validating female esports players. OG talks about, no, sorry, OO talks about how oh, stereotypes exist for women, therefore the harms towards women are much more amplified because the fan base is really toxic. They talk shit about women all the time and they always belittle women. But the thing is, I think stereotypes for women, especially with patriarchy existing inside society, exists on both sides. So I don't think the harm that OO brought up is exclusive for OG only. I think stereotypes or the harms towards women or men shit talking women will actually be amplified more on OO. I'll talk more about that later. But then three responses underneath this argument. Let's talk firstly about how the fan base is very toxic and how the harm is actually amplified on OO or on opposition. I think the harms will be amplified on their side because there's quite literally no reason for the separation or this drift or these separate brackets to exist to begin with. Because within other sports that do have separate brackets, the separate brackets are or deemed to be needed because you need physical capabilities or physical prowess to even excel in these sports. Like for example, they might say that women and women have biological differences, therefore the separate brackets are needed. But esports, these things are not needed whatsoever. Esports, as previously categorized, are very accessible sports. You just have to have a phone, a well-functioning phone, and a game in your phone, and like good internet, for example. So there's really quite literally no like there's no reason for these separate brackets to exist to begin with. So in the places where women can thrive the most, especially since you don't need any physical prowess, it's very accessible. Women are still being belittled as objects that are not capable of in doing anything, because even in the things that are most accessible to do and the most easiest to do, like you could kind of deem that, like for example, esports are easier to do than like sports, for example, although that's another debate for another day. Women are still belittled as like objects that are not capable of doing anything, because separate categories still made for them specifically. I think that just harms women the most. But let's talk about how the separate brackets are counterproductive towards the goal of the separate brackets to even begin with. They have two goals, right? Firstly, on like promote women's participation, but also to promote like women's visibility inside of esports to begin with. I think it's counterproductive towards that goal. For two reasons. One, because you never even truly give them an opportunity to begin with. Because when women enter like these like because for example, you have like less requirements to even like enter the women's brackets to begin with, but also you sideline them from the start without giving them a chance to actually improve. How do you improve then? You you improve by competing with people who are clearly better than you or clearly like above you in rank, for example. But when you bound them within the limits that these categories limit them to, or like these separate brackets limit them to improve to improve is to work hard with those above you, but there's literally no one above you when you compete inside of these separate brackets. Therefore, you're trapped within a box that you yourself never even set to begin with. So you cannot even actually improve to begin with, because you can never improve to begin with, because like, there's no one to like there's no metric that the metric is quite the highest metric inside of that like bracket is quite literally you, if you are like the best team, for example, and you cannot try when you compete with like a better players because they're in a different bracket. But also, let's third response underneath this like argument, then let's talk about how like when you create like separate brackets, you actually kind of create like a community of women that low-key are pitting against each other. Why is that true? A, because internalized misogyny does happen. I'm sorry, I'll not take that I'll not take that POI. Because internalized misogyny does exist and it does happen, especially for like in women's categories, then you kind of amplify the internalized misogyny. Then like for example, you like kind comparison between women happen on the metrics outside of how well they perform in sports, for example, because internalized misogyny happens. They compare on which player looks prettier, for example, etc., etc. But also, this kind of creates competition within women when women are not supposed to quite literally compete each other when they're quite literally the most like vulnerable minority inside of esports. I think it's just harmful when they cannot create a good community with each other. But secondly, let's talk about the counterfactual then. How is like, for example, VTubers or like online or like YouTubers who create like tournaments or Apex tournaments in Japan with like mixed genders, for example, have women who are quite literally thriving. Let's talk about two things. How can they thrive so well? Firstly, they're not separated to two different factions from the beginning, but also, secondly, they're given a chance to show their talents against the top players, for example, all right? If you have like a new female player who entered the field, for example, and like they quite literally immediately compete with like the top players, for example, and they do well, for example, right? Then you quite literally create icons, you quite literally create icons who are like a reference to the next generation of women who are coming into the sports, because you quite literally set like the whole narrative that, oh, turns out women are actually pretty good at esports, or they can be good at esports, because you give them a chance to improve to begin with. So you don't create a toxic fan base in which they think that, oh, women are always going to be so bad at esports, for example, or they're going to be ass at esports. But also you create good competition within the field in and of itself, because you don't have players who are constantly like, oh, belittling women, for example. They compete with anyone. If they're good, they compete with another player, and they have good sportsmanship. For all those reasons, OG.
All right, thank you for your speech. Yeah, to continue, let's welcome second speaker from Go. Oh yeah, don't forget you guys to tell your POI preference so that everybody can be informed.
Yes, I am audible.
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. For POI, just unmute yourself. No. Just in the chat box, please. Gonna start my speech. Set. Let me set my timer for 15 seconds. Three, two, and one. One case to break OG case. I think all they say is about if it's gonna be desperations, it's gonna be boring and etc. But looks how like Kak Zizi already told you, like our goals in this debate, the core of this debate is not how to entertaining those mates to looks like the audience, but yeah, what is the real moral and structural questions like about how women will get to feel safe, respected, and also visible inside this industry, because Kak Zizi already told you like how woman is only gonna be hiasan in this industry, right? But okay, I think opposition basically tells you about viewers might getting bored and etc. But I think boring is something that first is not that important rather than Kak Zizi case, but secondly, I think it's about boring is a very uncertainty, right? It's not from those gender, but more likely from those strategies, for example, the upsetness, the rivalries, the creativity, and etc. Meaning that there is no guarantee that this woman tournament is gonna be those boringness, because gonna tell you in my next argument, right? But okay, what I'm gonna bring in this debate, firstly, I'm gonna extend what Kak Zizi already told you, how women always excluded and also seen as those decoration, for example, which also deeply harmful, because looks how woman is not look for this, the value of woman is not look from how they skill or whatnot, but only from their body, from their face, and etc. This has never been protect by OG, right? So it's also this argument will also tackle down OG case about women participating. Firstly, what is the problem in status quo? I think it's already tell by Kak Zizi. Like women technically can join, but very very hard to survive, because the system was designed by those men, dominated by those men, and celebrated by those men. Meaning that when a woman finally can enter those space, they are not seen as a competitor, but more likely a decoration there. Look how at the end of the day, like who's this good those woman names, like Maiden, for example, who already have those potential, but again, when she already have a good game, her clips went viral in TikTok, not because her gameplay, but because of her appearance, her voice, her cute reaction. That is only they value you as a woman athlete in this esports. This is very important, because the system is not fair, basically, because your talent is being wasted, basically, because your skill is not something that valued there. You are not getting noticed by your skill, but more likely because of your appearance, right? This is very unfair for those women. That is why we need to protect them. We need to make those potential champions more likely gonna be more safe for them to be more productive, right? Because here's the thing, I think because those image that have been bring, because the representation builds identity, like okay, most of young girls will see like, oh, woman being woman is look like this in esport. They only getting a clip of them. It's not their skill, but more likely about their cute reaction. This is what make those psychological of young woman seems that I don't want to be esport, because ternyata women don't belong here. This is how the less participations of women would be there in OG, right? That is why a gender exclusive leagues is something that very important, because here's the things like Kak Gigi already told you. When some things already excluded you, when something already bias and harm you, you are very justified to getting out and make something group for you, for something safe for you, building a safer place for you, which you can be more focused for you to grow your skills, to get more sponsorship, to get more healthy environment, because that is your right as a woman. That is why I think the impact is already told you, like once women are visible in this industry, they can achieve those pro level, for example, and they are seems as their skill, it will inspire those younger girls who are like and love esports too. That's how representations work out now under outside of the house. Like, okay, I think it can be fix a bad reputations of woman in this industry, right? This how motivate other people. So here's the thing. I think when they say like, oh, why should separating themselves, it's wasting, it's wasting and makes our fans attention, blah blah blah. But look how we step back, right? Throughout those history, like every competitive ecosystem who started with male dominated, and women will start beginning to join. For example, football, basketball, and even chess, for example, they face the exact same barriers like harassment, unequal funding, and my media bias, right? That is why women's football are built, for example, because look, right now FIFA bring like Women's World Cup, for example, which also get millions of you, which also they're in your television, for example, which also inspire new generations of women who like sport, for example. This is how why Martha or Alex Morgan, for example, gonna be a global icons. But in their side of the house, in OG side of the house, the icon is always be that man. It always gonna be harmful industry for women, and woman athlete will always be draining and having no hope in this esport. That's why to build this hope, you should define yourself at the very first place. But secondly, it's talking about the profitable, right? I think the gender exclusive will when it's gonna be there will be more sponsorships like support women, for example. Your coaches, your managers, your analysts will also include women, for example, which if it's open, it's always be a job for men, for example, means that it's not for just players we save, but also for all people who love this sport, coaches, analysts, manager, friends, and etc., who loves a woman. Is going to be a safe place for them. But okay, let's take safety and mental health. I think is already told by Kak Zizi. Like it's not something that you can just like, oh, it's okay to not keeping their mental health safety, which already be harassed in this open, which they get constant sexist comments, for example, in their DM Instagram, for example. I think it's something that you cannot just underestimate. That is why it's very important. But let's play in the worst scenario. Even if the harassment is not like one night disappear, I think it's okay, because at least those female players is not two battle at once. At least like one in the game and one against public judgment. At least the pressure in them is just like this focusing on gameplay, not to defending their assistants, which is still better. But secondly, I think the toxic fans is not gonna be watched in this divided like exclusive for women, because those toxic fans usually driven by those patriarchal mindset, which they always want just to watch those male players. So less harm for women. Crouch.
All right, thank you for the speech. Again, please do be mindful of time. And to open the closing bench, please welcome first speaker from CG. Here.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
All right. Let me drink for a bit, then I'll start my speech. I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. The reason why this esport is specifically harmful to women is because the way that esport is specifically commercialized for people. Before that, 4 pieces of rebuttals. First, they try to tell you that not only that they do not really like want not only that they want to entertain audience, but like this, they want these women to feel like they're principally just, that they have the principle to like be this kind of like they have the principle to be the kind of role model, right? But we tell you that actually because opposition opposition took the really best case scenario, and they not took into account that esport is literally one of the most commercialized sport it's the most commercialized sport that actually there, right? Because it focused a lot more on the entertainment rather than the actual gameplay. We feel that is you can see this happening from like the way they sell merch, for example, like the way they sell tickets to like watch this kind of like tournament, right? And the way they can like commercialize how they kind of sort of like they kind of show that their players, for example, like the way they commercialize is very much important towards like the entertainment itself. So like this, they are really profit oriented. Second rebuttal stand when they tell you that women are only seen as decoration and women are not going to be seen as their skills. First layer of responses. First, there's no analysis on why this kind of like gender inclusive is not going to look at the women the same way that they look at the women in like the mixed gender, for example, right? That even in we try to tell you that even in this kind of like gender exclusive space, there will still be many men on their majority of the fan base. Understand that statistically, esport is one of the most one of the sport where like the intensity of the watcher of the fans is mostly men because guess what? It is directly targeted and it's specifically targeted towards men in the very first place. Like the way they commercialize this kind of stuff is very targeted towards men, right? So women will still only be seen as decoration in like this kind of like gender exclusive leagues because at the end of the day, it is just the way that this kind of like sport works. But third rebuttals then on how these icons, on how at the very least women are going to be seen as an icon, that they're going to be able to motivate other women. We try to tell you that no, this is not going to happen because why? First, because now by using this kind of like gender exclusive league, you're going to create this kind of like narrative towards these women that yeah, women actually need this kind of like gender exclusive league to be able to shine, for example. And you're just going to conform to the narrative that women are necessarily less than men. And why is it really likely then? Because understand that men, especially people who we really want to target, people who we really want to tell that women are just the same as men, are probably already have this kind of like misogynistic mindset right at the start of the day. So at the end of the day, they're just going to feel like, yeah, you're only able to reach this kind of like level of success because like, for example, because there's like lower requirement for you to become a grandmaster, for example, or like there's just like basically less competition in your side of the house. That's why you're able to win this kind of competition. But the fourth point of rebuttal then on why toxic fans wouldn't just watch women, we thought is going to be integrated on my argument. To my argument then, two things we want to prove to you. First, on why it uniquely harm women in esport, and second, on why it's going to hinder women from being able to actually self-develop. First reason, we tell you that the reason why it's specifically harmful to us, esport itself is specifically harmful towards women, especially when you do this kind of like gender exclusive, is because the way that it's commercialized. Understand that it's going to shift the focus away from the women's ability to play games towards the other stuff, towards other not necessarily ability-wise stuff, right? Because why? Because esport is not just about the player. We don't really esport itself commercialize themselves as not just about who wins and who loses. It's also about the story. It's also about the cult of personality, right? Understand that in esport, it's not only about the players, it's also about the sponsors and it's also about the fans. Sponsors themselves. Let's talk about the first actor then. About the have the incentive to please the fans. But who are the fans then? We try to tell you that the fans, even in these gender exclusive leagues, are still going to be majority like misogynistic men. They just want to they're less like it's less likely for like women to actually be able to it's less likely for women to even like watch esport at the very first place, right? Because it's just specifically targeted towards men. So at the end of the day, this sponsor would still want to please these kind of like fans. So what do these fans want? What do they want from actually watching this kind of like gender exclusive leagues? Then we tell you that first, they want to watch pretty athletes. They want to watch people who are like conventionally attractive, for example. We can see like Fior, for example, or Maiden, for example. Those kind of athletes, those kind of like esport athletes who are actually conventionally attractive. Like you want to watch them because you feel like, yeah, they're really interesting, for example, right? But second of all, then we also tell you that they're going to really want this kind of like cult of personality. We can watch this happening from like how these kind of like esport players like branch themselves out and like sort of like characterize themselves as like this influencer, for example, or like how they kind of show like what goes on before the tournament, the way like they train, for example, or like the relationship they have between like each and every one of them. So that's why we tell you that what these fans really want at the very start of the day is by watching this kind of gender exclusive leagues, it's just going to be about the entertainment itself. But then, why are company more likely to just like But then, what are the impacts then? It's going to look like companies. It looks like companies and sponsors actually sponsoring people who are not necessarily like being able to play better. But they're just going to sponsor people who are actually like more likable, for example, right? And because when you really want to because like the thing with that because companies and sponsors are more likely to invest towards people who are actually like more likable or people who have like better social media presence, for example, right? Because now they're going to be able to get they're going to be able to get more fans, but also B, they're able to get more buyback, for example. It's going to be easier to sell like merch, for example, and it's going to be easier to sell tickets, for example, when your fans are like clearly obsessed with this kind of like player, right? But also, what are the competitive then? The competitive are that in mixed sport, when we're talking about like mixed tournament esport, you're going to be able to have it's going to be much more competitive, right? Because when you really truly want to watch competitive competition, you don't really watch the specific gender. Like you're going to watch the mixed competition because you know the best of the best of both genders are going to be in the mixed competition. It's not going to be a segregated part. It's not going to be a like an exclusive part of like only one gender, right? It's going to be everyone that is actually really, really good and they're actually really, really competing. You're going to have like the aim of like the mixed gender competition and the like single gender competition is going to be very different. But what are the impacts then? First, we tell you that it's going to overshadow the good female player who are actually really, really talented in their side of the house. Because why? Because they're not going to get the chance to be in the spotlight. We tell you that in their side of the house, women who are actually able to get their spotlight in this kind of like gender exclusive place, it's just going to be women who are like naturally pretty, for example, or women who have like really, really good reaction when they're playing games, for example. Because why? Because it's just like more viral. Because people just want to buy more into them. Those kind of stuff. So also second on, we tell you that it's going to increase the narrative that men is better than women because guess what? People who already have this narrative, they're going to think that you're only able to win because you're in a separate part of the competition, for example. We also tell you that's going to hinder women from actually trying to self-develop because there's going to be less advanced in like there's going to be only meeting like a smaller bunch of people, and the incentive to gain better is going to be different because now you're focusing more on like how you're getting better, because now you're focusing on how to be more likable than actually how to get better in playing. Proud.
All right, thank you for the speech. Before we move on, wait for a moment.
I go by okay, I go by they them. If you have any question, any POI, just unmute yourself. Yeah. Gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. I don't play Mobile Legends. I don't play Valorant, Genshin Impact, or any other esport. But I know if you download this game, you're going to find a lot of female characters dressed in a very, very objectifying way. Not only because they're like hot, for example, but they are created to ensure that they are catered towards the male audience at the very begin with. I think CG managed to analyze that these esports are marketed very hardly toward men-centric market to the very begin with, but they never explain to you on how they want to change that market to a very good market where we believe that this objectification of female should no longer exist in the esport industry to the very begin with. This is why CO is going to be the best team out of here, because we're going to give you the analysis on how this debate is not just about winning, it's not just about on how we can have like good players, but it's how we can actually change the esport industry to ensure that the industry is objectifying towards women. Because we believe that this is so much more important compared to like the entire debate here. Let's analyze here. OO only talks about the idea of toxicity in terms of all of the among the players to the very beginner track. I think OG also agreed on this. But what you guys need to understand that these toxic players are not the only main problem. The biggest problem is on how the developers are currently using this esport, fertilizing the idea of sexism inside of it to ensure that all of these male players could always play this game and be more interested towards it. This is the reason why this sport is very much male dominated to the very beginner track. This is also the reason why CO's mechanization is the only one that's realistic here. We want to improve females' participation here, regardless if they're good or not, because the moment that we improve females' participation, we can ensure there's going to be so much more voices that will actually cater towards this objectification problem of women in this industry to very begin with. But more importantly, we're going to create a more safe esport, because finally, when we have a lot of participations of female in this esport to the very begin with, we're going to make sure that females' interests will also be catered towards the market to the very begin with. And ensuring that the entire case of CG has already debunked, simply because we're going to change the market, we're already going to be so much better compared to OO, because we're going to talk about something more than just the players, but also the root problem, which is the developers that fertilizing the sexism, but also going to cater towards the entire case of OG when they only talk about like basically it's going to be boring, they don't want it, yeah, stuff like that, simply because we believe that if we have this market, we're going to have so much more things. But yeah, what CO going to bring in this debate is basically several stuff. we're going to talk about on how the esport and game industry is very much historically rooted towards the market of men, and how currently in the current status quo, like the developers are very much also buying towards it. Second, I'm going to talk deeper into how the idea of participation will change the market in a very begin with. But before going there, more rebuttals towards the entire golf bench. First, let's go to OG first. I think OG's entire case is also based on sexism. Their entire concern is the idea that the moment that you play only in the bracket of female, you're not going to fight like good players to very begin with. I think this is very much sexist because it assumes the idea that there are no good female players to the very begin of, right? But I think it's also undermined the idea that this is just a bracket. You can also compete with like in the open category for the examples, right? You can always want to do that to the very begin with. But even if the concern is that you want to improve the players, I think this is also undermines what currently happening in the current status quo. Because the moment that you create this female exclusive competition, for the example, it will also be followed by the idea that you're going to also improve the players. For the example that you're going to provide a training for them. The same way that these competition also provide panels that going to like support a lot of female to actually like compete better in the nationals and prepare battles, for the examples, right? So this is also going to answer like Ari's concern in the idea of competition and the idea of improvement to the very begin with. Because what's more important in this debate is to ensure for them to be able to participate. No matter how many funding that you can give towards like one certain female athlete, like what Ari wants to do, the moment that you cannot create a safe environment for them to play, is no women will want to participate to the very begin with. So what was very much important to ensure the idea of safety, the idea that we need to actually like abolish the idea of objectification that done by the developers of this esport to ensure that females market are going to be catered. There are no more mommy milkers in the game. There are no more like female in sexy clothes simply because they only want to cater to a small audiences. So yeah, going to my first point of argument here. Let's talk about the idea of on how historically games, which is like the basis line of esport, are created to cater towards male. I think if we go back to like the early 70s, the main games are only talking about like shooting games, for the examples, violin-based game, which is something that always catered towards like boyish stuff to the very begin with. This is why historically female participation in esports in games is very much low to the very begin with, because the developers are only paying attention towards the male industry that currently like the idea of violence. They like the idea of like having sexy female characters in this game to the very beginner, right? This is the reason why sexism, like what the entire debate has already talked about, is very much big in this esport games to the very begin with, because the developers is taking benefit out of it. They make characters only pandering towards male gaze, for the example. We thought actually like thinking about what if like their female characters play it and feel uncomfortable, because why would like a female characters like a female Viking wear bikini to fight like other male characters that are going to wear like uh full armor, for the examples, right? This is also the reason why what important in this debate is to increase the participation of female, because the moment where we're going to have this bracket is going to be make a lot of safe space for like a lot of women to actually tap in towards the esport to the very begin with, so that they can at least see, first of all, on how objectifying it is, and at the end of the day, like these big numbers will actually like, call out the developers for doing this to the very beginning, right? Because if you follow the best case of OG or even like the entire golf bench, when they have a lot of funding, a lot of sponsors towards this to very begin with, they will actually like only sponsoring like one good female players, for the example. We're not going to have like a big voice to actually like counters down on how it's already been very much historically rooted that these developers are taking advantage of this objectification. So it is very important for you to cater towards the idea of safe space for a lot of women to tap in towards this esport by having this female bracket in competition, so that we can have safe space for a lot of women to tap in towards the competition, towards the esport industry and the entertainment like CG wants to the very begin with, so that we can ensure we're going to have a lot of voices to actually like call out these developers, call out this sexism, that you're not going to be the minority anymore the moment that you get into the Discord server of these several esport games to the very begin with. I'm very proud to post.
All right, thank you for your speech. Now to close the entire government case, please welcome government web. You're here.
Okay, my pronouns is she, her, And my POI preference is just by unmuting your microphone because I won't be looking at the chat. And I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Leagues and titles in esports shouldn't be just exclusively only for one gender. It's not like women are just playing or have a specific title in esports is bad, but why should it be only for women when you can give it to men and women? Wouldn't it be more equal in this situation? So I'm gonna do my rebuttals first. So my first rebuttal is more women being there is not as necessarily good, especially when you focus on the market. Because changing the market is not easy itself. When the entire esport are profit oriented, no matter how hard you try to sell the narrative, you are always going to conform to the fact that you have the pressure to create more and more money. So what's the point of women when their representation we get are not really good for women? So merit does not translate well. So merits you get on gender exclusive will never be able to translate to the esports society that focus on merits. You literally lower the requirement to be a certain winner. So for examples, if like you're in competition and then it's just for women, and you technically win the competition. So why is the so why so like in society's eyes, you are a woman and you're participating in women's competition and there's like nothing special. It's just like woman versus woman, not woman versus man. But if you participate in a woman versus men's competition and you win as a woman, the society's perspective will be like, oh, this girl is so amazing. She technically defeated this man on this competition. And moving on to the clashes. So the clashes that I got here in this debate is the capability of women. So in OO, they said that women always get excluded and seen as burden, decoration, and etc. And also they most likely to get judged when they make mistakes. Technically, we don't agree that women always got judged when they make mistakes. Apparently, I think every gender will be will be judged when they actually make mistakes. It's just not about women. It's just technically in esports when um there's like a player who actually done something wrong. It's not like if it's a man, it's not like going to be judged or anything. They are going to be judged because in this esports game there's no like they didn't really see the gender. They only see like how good is your skills, how good are you in this game. They only see that. And we as proposition also thinks that in this case women also benefits for the esports. Why? Because exactly what I said, this esports things are just very profit oriented. These women could like become like the brand ambassadors, the face of the esports, and they can actually bring more lots of profits to it. And when they became the winner and defeats the man, they technically get the spotlight. And our impact is like just because this esports is very profit oriented, our impact in our side's impact is like more predatory to women. Meanwhile, gender exclusive will just make it worse. And why is women actually give more benefits? Because first, they can actually prove to men that they also can do it. By what? By winning the competitions, join the competitions. So technically, they show the men like they actually have the setara status with them and have the same position with the men. So let's do the way here. And so we as proposition thinks that we actually wins. Why? Because we still let the woman to try things that actually men can do, and it could, and by doing this it could actually give like more benefits. It's either for the players or the sponsors and etc. And we're also giving the people who actually are very talented in this esports games, the game stuff, like to show their talent. It's just like not about just women who show their talent that they can be more superior or be better than men itself, but men and women also can shows that they are equal and they are both talented. And meanwhile, in opposition, they are just not giving any spotlight to women who actually are talented because they're seen by all women, and the society can think that just because they are women versus women doesn't mean that they are actually really good in this game, because it's women versus women. The society always thinks that, and they always highlight the woman as someone who's very likely to judge by the society. And meanwhile, in proposition, we don't really agree with that. And this is why I'm very proud to propose.
All right, thank you for the speech. Now to close the entire debate, please will come up with here.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, thanks. Wait. POI, just raise your hand. I'll try to take one. Okay. Okay. I'll start my speech. Oh yeah. Content warning. Might be saying some sensitive stuff. I hope it's not with ill intention. It's for the debate. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. I don't really understand what is both government's case, right? Because both of them agrees that women are highly scrutinized in the esports community. What alternatives do they bring you? One, OG said, okay, maybe you just stick a while in the esports community and just compete against men and let them hate you and let the fans hate you just for the very tiniest slight chance that you might win all over this hate, or you might change people's perspective and suddenly be seen as an icon. Which, by the way, there's no likelihood of it happening. The only thing that they mention is that, okay, we will want to give like women team to have more fundings instead of creating external leagues. Which, if we take it by their logic, if one, you have an sports community that already hates you just because you're a woman, or already see you as someone lesser because you're a woman, now you tell them that, oh, by the way, in this big international league, we are going to separate some fundings to fund for very specific woman team. I don't understand what they expect the reaction's gonna be, because I tell you that it's just gonna cause a much more massive outrage rather than just creating a separate league out there. Because the main thing about why people hate women, or why people seem that women are lesser in these esports spaces, is because they always have the thinking that, oh, they're trying to take away our sports. They're trying to infiltrate this masculinized community. They're trying to infiltrate this community that has allowed patriarchy to exist. They're trying to get away with their woke bullshit, right? So I don't understand why by funding those kind of ideas and trying to push that narratives, it will suddenly change the perspective or suddenly make women feel safer in the sports community. But let's look at CG. CG is even more sexist because they mentioned that, oh, because esports community is very profit oriented, it's very okay for you to sacrifice your safety and sacrifice your idea because one, we don't think that women gets easily judged, but two, we think that women can benefit from esports by being brand ambassadors. This thinking is what society tries to push you, that what you can do or the best that you can take in this kind of like hellhole that you're living in is that you become a brand ambassador for Onyx, you become a brand ambassador for like Just No Limit, you become those girls that become the face of these teams, and maybe if you're pretty enough, if you're sexy enough, people will like you. But that's not what we want. We don't want women to ever feel like that anymore. We don't want women to fight for scraps in a community that's so masculinized, in a community that very highlights that, oh, if you want to be the champion, if you want to be the person that's like seem as good, seem as like a popular one, is that you need to be masculine, you need to prove that you have a steel face to propose all of this. We want to create an external community. It's okay if we are seen as like we are separating ourselves from the original esports community, because like I think we should by this moment. But also too, we want this woman, either they're competitive enough or either if they're just the casual players, to at least know that they are safe here. This is like exactly why IWGM was built, because it's not just specifically to say that, oh, at least women have more chances to become champion, but at least it's to know that even if you're just debating for casualty, even if you're just debating for competitiveness, you are safe, and there are people who will respect you, there are people who won't see you just as like a bitch who tries to like become a brand ambassador or something. So this is something that needs to be measured here, that one, what CO has already tried to prove is that at least safetyness should be handled first rather than competitiveness or anything at all. And we will prove to you why it is still okay, even if we're talking about like athleticness and like esports. But two, that at the end of the day, it is a possibility to change the nature of esports, and the only way to do it is by separating ourselves from the community that actively harms and target us, right? So, by the way, just an extra clarification, I think it needs to be pinpointed that an exclusive like gender-based community or league or like exclusive title is just gonna exist like any other title right now. Like for example, in debating you have novice and open. But if you feel like you're brave enough to go to the open leagues, then you can just go ahead to do that. It doesn't mean that you constantly just need to stay at like one league. You can also join other different leagues. But if you feel that it is unsafe for you to do so, there is someone who will protect you. There is community that cares for you and will be there for you. So responses and also comparisons on why CO is the only team who can manage women's interests and also esports community interest in this debate. First, against OG tries to mention that one, we don't need this because esports doesn't have different physical powers, and like everyone has an accessibility if you have a phone or you have a Wi-Fi. But also two, they also try to prove that women are actively being harmed in the community right now. So rather than just moving away from the community, just stay in the community and like hope for someone to save you, or like just try to blend in enough so that you will not get hated and like to be visible enough. But still, you need to stand out a bit so that you can be visible, so that you can be like the brand icon. We'll prove to you why actually this is such a bad narrative to happen. Because first, the idea that right now esports doesn't need a separation because it doesn't have a physical power, it's just like you saying that IWGM shouldn't exist because debating doesn't have physical differences. Because we tell to you that esports is not always about that. It's also about sportsmanship, right? It's not about like, okay, maybe like different biological standards, but it's also about how a player's mental mindset can exist when they are being in a community. Let's say I go into ML big leagues and I'm a woman and I need to see men who have actively made statements that hate women or see women as just like sexual objects in TikTok, and I need to play against him. How do you think that can affect my mental mindset being there? Sure, maybe you'll say, but okay, still like that's just your skill issue. But exactly this skill, even if like you exactly they want to say you want to build capability by like training. We think that training is not only just like, okay, you go against like the bigger people, but it's also making sure that like equity, making sure that you are in a place where your skills and abilities can be maximized to its full potential without having any mental blocks. And this is why like this gender exclusive thing has an exclusivity to protect that. But two, they still try to mention it doesn't matter anyway, because like the narrative is that you want women to be good at sports, and this is the idea that they bring. Sorry, Ari, it's already 6. This is the idea that they try to bring, that the only way that woman can be seen as someone who is good at sports is that if you go to the open leagues, right? If you fight against men, then this is the question: isn't that exactly the misogynistic idea that is being pushed right now by esports company, by the masculine community that we exactly hate? Because they try to push that you're never good enough if you don't fight against men. You're never good enough if you don't win against the Mongolian counter team that like they try to bring an example. This is also something that trickles down to CG's argument. But this is the question then. One, it's okay if we don't see as like good enough to fight against them, because this is exactly the point. We want to change the esports nature, that it doesn't always have to be about them. It can be about us and how we feel safe enough to play like safely and to create a better community, at least for the woman itself. And that's why I proudly oppose.
All right, thank you for the speech. Yeah, that marks the end of the debate. Yay, thank you.